My name is Rick Firestone. Welcome to pixelprojectradio, a video game discussions and club-style podcast where we do deep dives on all of our favorite games and some of yours, too. This is a very special episode because we've got a very special guest who I've been looking forward to talking to on the show for quite some time now. Keith. We've got Keith from the Main Quest podcast. How's it going, dude? Thanks so much for joining me.
It's going, man. It's brand new, I guess, studio, if that's what you want to call it, for me over here. Things are very hot because behind this backdrop here is actually the AC unit, because recording studio is in the same room as the AC unit, and there's like a incredibly, shockingly hot heat wave in Wisconsin right now. It's scorching in here, but you know what? I've been told it's the summer of video games or something like that. And video games are happening. Video games are hot in the street, and I'm here with you today to talk about
so hot
video games.
Right now.
But yeah, thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it. I've been listening to you. Ben's not here today, and so this is what you get, Ben, when you're not here. You get me on your podcast, kind of like a rambunctious person in our circles, because somewhat of a degenerate, and so here I am to bring your podcast down.
I'm very glad that you are here. I was telling this to Eric from the Unlockables podcast a while back, I think on his show. But when we first started, the two first shows that we really started getting into contact with and talking with were the two of you. Yeah, and it was just really great to immediately find two, not only just great people with great shows, but two folks that were so supportive of new people to the scene. So we've been trying to pay that back to everybody that we've talked to. It's been really great. So
yeah, I think the first couple episodes that I listened to, and I think Eric probably has said the same, is your guys' coverage on Final Fantasy IX. And I think I might have actually messaged him about that. I'm like, have you heard of these guys? Because I know his favorite game, or one of his favorite games, is Final Fantasy IX. And I'm like, you should check out these episodes. Like, they're really, really good. And ever since then, honestly, it's your velvety smooth voices that, you know, make it so damn easy to listen to. And then on top of that, just the way you guys just break stuff down. You guys have a vocabulary and like a rapport with each other that I guess is unmatched. I don't listen to any other video game podcasts that are even come close to sounding as smart as you guys do. So
that's very sweet, man. Thank you. I really appreciate that. But as much as I like being flattered with compliments, and believe me, I do, I wanted to give you a spot at the top of this episode to sort of talk about what you do on the Main Quest. It just as you said that you are of us, I am a fan of your show as well. So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about what you do and what your show is?
So yeah, I host the Main Quest podcast. It is a podcast that is mainly documenting my history of playing video games and basically documenting on a game-by-game basis of what I played growing up until, you know, early adulthood. And so right now I just finished up the NES, and I went through my TurboGrafx 16 library before that, and I will soon be going through my library of Game Boy games. And by the end of every episode, I typically try to, from having dissected for the entire episode, on the points that I had made throughout the podcast, I try to see if I can still recommend that video game. Yeah, I don't know. It's all fun, you know. It's all in good fun, and I think a lot of people that follow me on social media, I'm so definitive in what I say. I'm very much like, nah, this is just how it is, and that's just because I don't know how to social media, you know. The podcast is a lot more thorough, and I feel like my points come across and make it sound a little more easier to a pill that's easier to swallow, so to speak.
And another thing that I quite like about your show too, I don't I don't want to go too far before we actually talk about our game today, but another thing that I like about your show quite a bit too is the retro spin on it. It's almost exclusively talking about retro titles. I'm somebody that has a real strong fondness for retro games. Retro being, PS2 and backwards, whatever generation that was. There's just so much gold in those eras. I don't like the phrase the golden age, never have, never will. But in a lot of ways, that PS1, Nintendo 64, up through PS2, GameCube, Xbox era, it had a lot of just quality video games. And it's great to hear people talk about that and the games that preceded those and how they impacted things, and it's just really great. I'm a big fan of retro gaming. I want to get to the game because this is a really delightful game, and I'm really happy that you picked it. We are, of course, as you know by looking at the title, listeners, talking about Cadence of Hyrule, Crypt of the NecroDancer, featuring the Legend of Zelda. That is the full title. We'll just refer to it as Cadence of Hyrule. As we usually do on this show, I wanted to, up top, just sort of talk about, generally how we felt about the game, and then get into our histories with it. I might add in a little history of, at least for me, rhythm games in general, just because my history with this game is so short. But you can take whatever spin on that you'd like, if you wouldn't mind going first, as our guest.
So I first came across Cadence of Hyrule when it was announced during a Nintendo Direct or something like that, and I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool. Having learned that it was done by the folks that did Crypt of the NecroDancer, I'm blanking on their name right now.
Brace Yourself Gaming, I think they're called.
Brace Yourself Gaming, yeah. And having played Crypt of the NecroDancer previously and having bounced off it very quickly, I kind of just dismissed it. I did think it was very cool that Nintendo was letting somebody else do something with their IP, because usually when Nintendo does that, it ends up being pretty cool, and they've done that previously with Capcom. They've done it with Atlas. They've done it with Ubisoft with the Mario Rabbids games, and those games all tend to do fine. I mean, there's a couple people that would say that the Capcom Zelda games are not that great. I think they're pretty wonderful games. In fact, I would say Minish Cap's probably one of my top 5 Zelda games. I really enjoyed it, but that's neither here or there. So Cadence of Hyrule went on sale. It had to have been like late spring, early summer. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna get it. It's on sale. How do you just not buy a game when you see it on sale? It's right there. So I picked it up, and it took me a little bit to get into it. But I just loading. Once you start the game and it's on that intro screen, I could just sit on that intro screen forever. Like that title screen, the artistic direction, and the music. I mean, it hit me right in the nostalgia bone, Initially, when I started it up, though, I was a little hesitant because it starts out with a cutscene that's very Crypt of the NecroDancer, and I was like, but that doesn't last very long. It quickly does just kind of turn into a Zelda game very quickly. So I guess what I'm saying is what worked with Cadence is that it is a Zelda game more than it isn't, whereas Crypt was something, it was an original IP that I just didn't hit for me, That's pretty much where I stand as far as my history with the game.
That's very interesting. I'm looking forward to dissecting some of that, because as you may know, and as many other folks that listen might know, I have almost no history with Zelda. I have beat one Zelda game, and I have tried maybe 5. I'm not a big fan of the series, for better or for worse, but my history with this game is very short. I learned of it whenever I asked you what you might like to cover on the show, and this was one of your suggestions, and I looked it up, and I was like, yeah, that actually sounds super cool. I shortly after got the original NecroDancer. I didn't play as much of it. I think this game, Cadence of Hyrule, is largely just a more polished and better version of that. but not because I disliked the original. It just seems like they took all the good parts from it and improved upon it. And from the Zelda games that I've played, I vastly prefer the 2D to the 3D, with the big exception being Majora's Mask. But that's largely due to lore and tone. But this felt like a genuinely good 2D Zelda game, and certainly the best Zelda spin-off. I don't think there's an argument to be made that any other Zelda spin-off titles are quite this good.
Not cross-bro trading. Definitely not that one.
This is super good. This is a great game. I think the price is a little steep at time of recording. It's $35 from what I can find. That's maybe a bit steep for what the game is, but if you are a big fan of roguelikes and like to just optimize runs, this is the game for you. Really, really terrific.
Is the $35, is that for everything? Is that the complete with like the DLC, the extra characters, all that stuff?
I believe I'm just looking at GameStop because it was the first hit, although don't buy from them if you can help it. It's actually new at GameStop right now. It's $40. Oof, and it looks like that does not include the season pass. So, yeah, that's a bit steep.
Yeah, for just the base game. I mean, I don't know if we're going to talk about Symphony of the Mask, but that was a free upgrade. So, and I know some of the characters you had to buy separately and stuff like that, which I did not. Luckily, the complete edition was... My version of the game came with the characters, and then Symphony of the Mask came out a couple months after I had bought the original game, so I kind of looked out there.
For those that don't know, let's talk a little bit about what this game is. This is essentially a reskin and, for all intents and purposes, upgrade of the original game Crypt of the NecroDancer. They are both rhythm/roguelike-esque games. I get roguelike and roguelite confused. I don't know the difference.
I think it's a roguelite, but I think calling this game a roguelite is kind of a disservice. I would put very, very hard emphasis on light. Roguelite, because I mean there are some items if you do happen to die, there are some items that you don't take with you, but they're not items, especially later in the game, that you necessarily really need. It's stuff like the shovel or the torch, and that stuff you're just going to come across naturally as you explore. So it's technically a roguelite, but it's like, I wouldn't say it's that definitively, I guess. Does that make sense?
Oh, sure. I mean, look, genre limitations and labels like that serve a very limited purpose. And in talking about, what art is, I think they're largely superfluous.
It has those elements, but I would say first and foremost, it is like an action rhythm game.
For sure. I mean, it plays exactly like a Legend of Zelda game from the 2D era. You're progressing across the map. You move to the corners, well, not the corners, the borders of the map to progress to a new map screen. You're going through dungeons, you're finding items, etc. But the big twist and the big verb that they took from the original Crypt of the NecroDancer is that you have to move to the beat of the music that's playing. And that's what makes this game so cool. The enemies are going to move to the beat, you have to move to the beat, and it's a super fun sort of hook. And it works so well, I think, in this game and in NecroDancer because of the music. But I think we'll have a ton to talk about with the music, so first I wanted to talk about visuals a little bit. How did you think this game looked? How did you like it?
Oh, man. So, like I said, I didn't really like Crypt, one, because of the music, but also I really just couldn't get into, like, the design of the characters. It's something about it just looked... It's going to sound real bad. Something about it just looked cheap. Something about it seemed very... I don't know. I'm using all of the wrong words to describe the artwork. It's just something childlike. It's like cheap morning cartoons. Does that make sense?
It reminded me of the Flash era. It looked like it had its roots in the Flash era where indie content was still young. I'm a little softer on NecroDancer than you and some other folks are. I quite like the music, and I didn't dislike the art style, but it's hard to argue that it looks better than Cadence of Hyrule. This game just looks terrific.
Yeah, and like I said, it's like pulling wool over my eyes because it is it's a lot like Crypt of the NecroDancer, but with a Zelda skin on it, and so you've already sold me on that much, and a lot of it really takes, style-wise, and a lot of the music takes a lot from one of my favorite Zelda games, which is A Link to the Past. And so already I'm in love, like, automatically. Like, you look at the way the trees are stylized in Cadence. They look like they're lifted directly out of A Link to the Past. Interestingly enough, I guess the other aspect that's a roguelite is that the map is randomized. So you never get the same map when you start a new game. It's not like when you turn the game on, every time you turn the game on, the map is going to be different. It's just when you start a new game, you're just going to get a different map. But a lot of the areas are very reminiscent of A Link to the Past. So Gerudo Desert looks much like the desert area in A Link to the Past. You get my point.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. Going back to the level design bit that you talked about, the map is not going to be randomized every time, but the dungeons are procedurally generated, much like roguelites. This reminded me, I was thinking specifically as I was playing this of The Binding of Isaac, which has some ties to this game via the composer, but the dungeons in that game too are also procedurally generated. The thing about this game, though, and this is like one of the smallest nitpicks I have, is that when you're in a dungeon, they largely start to feel monotonous and very samey because it's all going to be diggable walls, enemies all around. You got to get to the next floor, and there's an item shop somewhere. Isaac does the same thing, but I think the reason that I noticed it more in Cadence of Hyrule is because when there are enemies around, you have to move to the beat, and that can be slow at times. Even if the tempo is upbeat, it's still slower than just freely moving. And it really caused me to notice, like, oh, wow, this looks exactly like the last floor I was on. Or, look, enemies behind a diggable wall. What a surprise. That's the one nitpick I have.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. That is probably one things that they could have maybe changed up a little bit, made a little more Zelda-like, other than just being like, hey, it's a dungeon. But it's like, well, you're missing a lot of the puzzle. You're missing a lot of the stuff that makes a Zelda dungeon a Zelda dungeon. So you're missing the puzzles. You're missing the items that you would get in a dungeon. You're missing those to really make any type of forward progress. Not saying that you don't get classic items in this game. You get a hook shot, you get the bow, you get the fire and ice rod, all that stuff. That's all here. But there's really no rhyme or reason as to when you get them or how you get them. You just come across them, pretty much. And I'll say the same thing as far as the caverns that you find on the world map as well are just very monotonous. It's sometimes the items that you get at the end of those caverns, because sometimes there might be like a enemy encounter, a tough enemy encounter that you might have to get through, or there might be a puzzle that you have to solve in any one cavern that you come across. And at the end of all of that, you might just get a new shovel, which is like, well, I already have a shovel. So I don't really need this item. So that was another kind of part that I feel like they didn't fully flesh out.
Yeah, I fully agree. There were more than a couple times I got to the end of a particular area or dungeon, and like you said, it's like I got the same exact shovel. Or, well, actually, that would be somewhat useful because then your shovel is fully restored in terms of, how soon it's going to break. But you might get, I don't know, some kind of a charm that is completely useless to you. Mm-hmm. That can be a little frustrating. It was never so irksome that I was actively like not having a good time, but looking at it critically, it's like, yeah, that could have been improved upon just a little bit. But
Sure.
outside of the procedurally generated dungeons, there weren't any areas in this game that I genuinely disliked. In fact, a lot of them I thought were really nice. The first time I got to Gerudo Valley Desert, I don't know how it's called. Just the change in music, the change in scenery, the change in enemies. I was vibing. I was like, hell yeah, this is really good. This is really cool.
And to go back on what you said about the encounters being, they can kind of be a little slow. I actually didn't mind that much. I really like puzzle games. And so the approach to combat in this game, every approach is essentially its own little puzzle, because not only do you have to move to the beat, but the enemies are also moving to the beat. And every enemy type also has different ways that they can attack you as well. So that really opens the combat up, and you really have to think things through, because you can die very quickly. Things will very, very quickly get out of hand if you're not sure what you're doing. And I don't know, I really, really enjoyed that. There were some instances when it comes to the DLC that I was like, I don't care about this. And that's specifically like the boss rush at the end of the DLC. Did you play the DLC?
So no, I did not play the DLC.
Okay. In the DLC, in Symphony of the Mask, they do also kind of fix one of the issues that I was just talking about with the caverns, and there just being a puzzle and like really not that much of a reward. They have this one dungeon called I want to call it the Song of Storms, but that's not what it's something like, it's a play off of that. It has the Temple of Brainstorms area, which is just this gigantic labyrinthian. Labyrinthian? Is that a word?
Sure, why not? Yeah, why not?
I think the word I'm looking for is just this labyrinth. It is just this labyrinth filled to the brim with puzzles. This is, for all intents and purposes, a classic 2D Zelda dungeon. There's not a lot of enemy encounters in it. It is very much just straight up puzzles, which I know some people will probably just be like, I don't want to do that. That's something that I absolutely love, and that is something I think a lot of modern Zelda games are missing, or some just really, really difficult puzzles. There were a couple that I had to look up. I'm not going to lie. They are very difficult. And then even the boss at the end, which is Synth Rova, play off of Twin Rova from Ocarina of Time. She's incredibly difficult.
I'm with you on the puzzle aspect. I think that's an area where Ben and I differ. I really think replaying Majora's Mask as an adult, Zelda puzzles aren't always really the most, how do I phrase this? They're not always the most difficult. They're pretty easy, and rightfully so. I mean, they are games aimed at children, so it's fine. But I don't know, when folks rave about Zelda puzzles and like, oh, I love the puzzles in Zelda, it's like, well, you love them because they're easy and you figure them out very quickly, and it gives you that rush of like, I'm smart, I figured it out. And it's like,
so
I
you're
get
calling
it, dude.
me stupid, Ray.
No, I thought we were saying like the same thing. Like Zelda puzzles aren't, they're not super hard.
No, like I said, the Temple of Brainstorms it's easy up to a point. Like I said, it does, at least I thought some of them got pretty difficult. There's some really elaborate block pushing puzzles. But I mean, this isn't like The Witness or anything like that. Like this, you're not going to put down the controller after 10 minutes or anything like that. I do remember what I was going to say earlier, because we were talking about the combat. And Symphony of the Mask you have to beat, I don't remember the pun on King Dodongo's name. It might be like King Babongo or something like that. King Dodongo is essentially the last boss of the DLC, but to get to him, you have to go through a boss rush, which sucks. I will never, ever come to the defense of a boss rush. Not even Mega Man. I know Mega Man has a history of having boss rushes in their games, but it sucks. stop doing that. And it's really, really bad here. Even as much as I enjoy the combat, I don't like doing it with a boss rush, so.
In that DLC, in Symphony of the Mask, you play as Skull Kid.
Yes, and the entire thing's kind of based off Majora's Masks, so you do collect different masks that give you certain power-ups.
Yeah, I had read about it, and I wanted to play it for this episode. I didn't get around to it. I'm almost certain I don't have the season pass or the DLC. So it was like, I don't want to spend more money on it, and then also time, was just a factor. So I am bummed, but this is a game that I'm going to go back to for sure. So it is something in my future that I'd like to see.
I'm curious. Let me take over your show because Ben's not here. So we were talking about off air kind of our history with rhythm games, and you brought up Amplitude, which is something that I've never played. My very brief history with rhythm games up until now began and ended with Guitar Hero. So I'm kind of curious because you mentioned so many other games that I was just kind of like, huh?
I would love to talk about my history with rhythm games, and it's related because actually this we'll talk about them. I keep saying we'll talk about it, but we will. I promise. Stick around. But so the composer of this game, he also worked on the reboot of Amplitude, which was done in I think 2016. But Amplitude was a game. I want to say 2005 or 6, but it was one of, if not Harmonix's first games. And it came out actually on a demo disc from PlayStation Underground. That's where I played the hell out of that demo disc. And by the way, let me just say, I miss the days of demo discs. Nothing got me more hyped than getting a demo disc in the mail. I remember Amplitude, Brave Fencer Musashi, Blast Chamber. I played so many great games on demo discs. And then there was that one holiday demo disc with Beautiful Joe that had a bug in it that wiped your memory card if you played it. That was the last demo disc I ever played. And I talk about it all the time. But so I played that on there. Amplitude, so Guitar Hero, you're on a track, right? And you've got the 5 frets.
Right.
Amplitude looked identical, except there were only 3. And it wasn't a guitar, obviously. It was like, I don't know, they looked like you were shooting lasers at the little nodes that came up. But there were only 3 of them. But the cool thing about it was instead of just one track, you could go left and right to like 5, 6, or 7 tracks. And each track represented drums, bass, synth, vocals, whatever. And as you went through the song, as you started the song, you could only start with one. So you have to decide, do I want the drums to start? Do I want the guitar to start? And then you just built it and built it and built it. So there's like a little mixing element. And that was super cool. I was just reliving that whole soundtrack the other day when I just happened to start listening to the band Garbage. One of their songs, Cherry Lips, was on Amplitude. And I was like, oh my God, I remember that game and it's relevant to this episode we're doing. So that was super cool. That was my first rhythm game. And then obviously Guitar Hero, Rock Band, etc. Rhythm games are really hit or miss for me. They've got to have something to them. I think everybody got swept up in Guitar Hero, but it didn't really, it doesn't do it for me anymore. Like it doesn't, I can't explain it. It just doesn't appeal to me. Whereas this has, in addition to playing to the beat, you have to solve minor puzzles, or if you're looking at enemy movement as a puzzle, it has that. Amplitude kind of had that switching back and forth kind of deal. Even games like Vib Ribbon, which was like a Europe/Japan exclusive PS1 game, had something to it. I don't know. But yeah, rhythm games, what a tangent.
So you're not a DDR SingStar type of guy.
I mean, look, if we're at a barcade and there's DDR, I'm going to partake in DDR. I'm not a monster, but like, I'm not going to buy DDR for my home,
Yeah, I've never been good at DDR, first of all. Yeah, Guitar Hero was basically my entry, unless you're going to count like karaoke, which you could have a conversation of whether karaoke is a rhythm game or not. but that was eventually introduced into Rock Band and Guitar Hero in those games. And aside from that, then it's just this game, and I don't know what it is. Oh, actually, let me backtrack. I just played that game that was announced a couple days ago. Well, I don't know when this is coming out, so I just dated the episode. But during Jeff Keighley's summer pool party, they announced that Metal Hellsinger game, which is basically a first-person shooter Doom clone, but it's a rhythm game. And honestly, that game has a lot of potential. It's a little wonky as far as the controls go. I don't know if a rhythm game translates very well as a first-person shooter.
It's an interesting concept.
It definitely is, yeah.
It sounds to me like one of those crossovers that has the potential to be very good, but even more potential to sort of be mismatched and fail, and not a lot of middle ground.
I think initially I want to play it just like you would play Doom. Very quickly. Very quickly. And the game wants you to obviously follow the beat, which the soundtrack for that game is primarily metal, right? So it is really trying to enforce that, yeah, you do want to go quickly because the rhythm is very fast. And it's also asking you to do that by the way the enemies attack you as well. But the thing is, unlike Cadence of Hyrule, the enemies in Metal Hellsinger are not moving to a fixed beat. They are just moving however the hell they want to. And so that is basically where the problem lies with that game, because it wants you to play it like a Doom game, but follow this rhythm, but there's no rules for anything else. Does any of that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I didn't see that announcement. I don't even know that I saw that whole pool party or whatever you called it. It just
Jeff
sounds
Keighley
like
floating in the pool with a giant rubber duck. He's like, hey, here's some video games.
No, I tuned in to hear Persona get announced, and then I tuned out to whatever stream that was. I was like, okay, I got what I came for. It sounds like the two ideologies just kind of clash. You know, Doom is all about run and gun, go fast. So Doom is basically Sonic, I think is what I'm saying. And, you know, to add a rhythm element where you have to sort of take your time and be more thoughtful, they sound clashing, but I'd be interested to see how it plays out. I'm not going to discount it, certainly.
Yeah, you can try it. There's a demo out, which is how I played it. So yeah, I mean, if you're at all interested, it's there.
For sure, my dude. We've mentioned a couple of mechanics in Cadence of Hyrule, so I was hoping to move to that. But before we do, one last thing about visuals that I have in the development section of my notes, but I'm going to bring it up now, is that part of the team from Sonic Mania actually worked on the art design for this. So it's no surprise, like reading that or hearing it, it's like, yeah, that makes total sense because Sonic Mania looks terrific. It's I can't remember where I heard this. It's probably somewhere on the Duckfeed network because that's really one of the only other video game podcasts I listen to. But they had this comparison of retro versus retro, which, you know, spelled RETREAUX, like the hip, like it's cool to be retro kind of thing. And the Sonic Mania team, I think, is very much in the former camp, where it just looks like a love letter to the original Sonic games, and frankly is probably the best 2D Sonic game, but we're not talking about Sonic this episode, even though we brought him up like 5 times.
My lips are sealed.
But no, they worked on the art design for this, and it really shows. I mean, it's clear that the visuals were done by a team that wanted to pay homage to the original Zelda games, and I love it. It looks great. If it would have come out with the sort of soft, rounded Nintendo 2D graphics like they're doing with A Link to the Past or the Pokemon Diamond remakes, this game would have not been as good to look at to me.
And the thing about those remakes too, I mean, Pokemon Diamond and Pearl specifically, that was still Game Freak. That wasn't a different developer. So, yeah, can I drop a hot take? You know, that's what I'm known for. I am the pot stirrer. I feel like Nintendo should just take at least Zelda and just let somebody else do something with it. Because I don't, this is my personal opinion, Keith of the Main Quest. Zelda games just aren't interesting to me anymore. And I really did not enjoy Breath of the Wild. And then coming to this and playing this, and I was like, yeah, man, I don't know. Whenever Nintendo seems to hand off their property to somebody, they take it in a fresh direction. And it's interesting. It's fun to play. And by all means, I mean, this isn't a very long game. It does promote several playthroughs when it comes to the different characters. You do get to play as the villain later on. So, yeah, I don't know. To me, it feels like the well has run dry with Nintendo, because you think about Mario. What are they going to do? Are they just going to put another Mario Odyssey, or are they going to go back to that like pseudo 3D well, you know, not even but it's like the halfway, like there's a word for it, 2.5D Mario or something like that. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I think Mario might be the exception to the rule. I am by no means an expert on platformers or Nintendo, but I thought Odyssey was a simply terrific game, like a 10 out of 10. I can't think of a way to make Odyssey better.
I'm not saying Mario Odyssey is a bad game. I actually think it's probably one of the best 3D Mario games. When you think about it, it's just another 3D Mario game.
Yeah. To your point about Zelda, though, I agree, but two, Nintendo to me is a lot like Apple, where they're not so focused on innovation. They let the other crowds do that and then jump in if they feel like it. They like releasing, it seems to me, games that are comfortable to people, at least their first party productions, you know, Kirby, Yoshi, Zelda. It seems like they choose that comfort and familiarity over pushing the boundaries. And there are pros and cons to that, to be fair, but I'm with you. Every Zelda game that I have tried, I have put down because I like looking at them. They look great. The music is always terrific, but it's like, I just get bored. I can't, and I'll put the caveat, haven't played Breath of the Wild. Frankly, I don't really have a strong desire to. But, you know, I won't judge it until I give it a chance. But I put down Wind Waker. I put down, Sonic Unleashed Zelda, Twilight Princess.
Sonic Unleashed Zelda.
Yeah, another Sonic reference.
Yeah.
You know, I am going 100% to give Link's Awakening another go. I would like to give the Oracle games another go. Even though I know they're not looked too fondly on. But yeah, I don't know about 3D Zeldas, man. They don't do it for me. I'm with you.
I will add the caveat that even the Zelda games that I don't like, they usually have a banging soundtrack.
Oh yeah, always. Hard to argue against that. Let's talk about the mechanics. We've talked quite a bit about some of the mechanics just in passing for Cadence of Hyrule, but I wanted to jump back to that. So the main verb of this game was taken straight from Crypt of the NecroDancer, and that is you have to move to the beat of the music that's playing. I'm going to give a quick clarification because this is a current TikTok thing, and I am a 30-year-old man on TikTok. For better or for worse. I don't make any content because that would be embarrassing, but I watch videos. Beat versus rhythm. You do not move to the rhythm of this game because the rhythm of any given thing is the specific, well, I'm using the word to define the word. It's the specific pattern of rhythmic activity. So you might have boom, 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 boom. That's a rhythm. The beat to that would simply be boom, 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 boom. So you get boom, 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 boom. The clapping is the beat. So in this game and in Crypt, you move to the beat. And that is very cool because there are many, many, many different works and arrangements and tracks that use different tempos, and there are tempo increases and decreases throughout. One of the things that I noticed that I didn't really engage with too much was if you consistently are on beat, I guess something gets powered up or at least chained together, and if you miss a beat, then you lose that. Do you have any insight into that? Because that is not a mechanic that I ever really noticed. Because I never missed a beat. No, it's just because it never seemed like it did anything to me, but I think it's there.
So there's two things that it does, and I will say this game is very lenient as to what it counts as you being on beat. So that's not a huge issue typically. So as far as having, I don't know if there's a term for it in game, but if you are consistently on beat, there's a metronome at the bottom of the screen, essentially, that helps you, to keep track of the beat. You can also go into the options, which is something that I did, and there's an option that you can turn on to make the controller vibrate when you need to basically press a button to stay on beat, which is something I turned on. It helped me out a lot. So if you are consistently on beat, the metronome will start basically pulsating, or there'll be like lightning and stuff around it. This not only gives you, it basically buffs your damage, so you can take out enemies a little bit faster, but also once you clear a board or a screen, I'm talking like a retro gamer, call a screen a board. Once you clear the screen of enemies, they will drop items. Basically, there's two forms of currency. You get your regular rupees, and you also get the diamonds, these diamonds that you use. I think they're just used at the beginning of the run if you die, right? Because I think the shops are just regular rupees.
Yes, all of the shops in-game use rupees. If you lose a run, all of your diamonds, you don't lose your diamonds, and you can sort of get a pre-run buff by purchasing items that way.
Right.
Again, straight out of Crypt from the NecroDancer. They brought it over.
So that's essentially the bonuses that you get if you stay on beat. And after playing Metal Hellsinger recently, the thing I really want to commend Brace Yourself Games on is that metronome, because, again, I think this has a lot to do with Metal Hellsinger being a first-person shooter, is that metronome is smack dab in the middle of the screen. So as you're trying to shoot things, lines are moving across the middle of the screen, and it's pulsating and all that, which is incredibly distracting. Whereas Cadence of Hyrule, that metronome is at the bottom of the screen, and I feel like the animation of that is just big enough and noticeable out of the corner of your eye where that you don't need to constantly be looking at it to know if you're on beat or not. And again, the accessibility option of making the controller rumble is also there, so that also factors into it a little bit as well. But after a while, I wasn't really even paying attention to the metronome at all.
Especially once you get into a, quote unquote rhythm with the track that's playing. But you are right. They give you a plethora of ways to keep track of the beat. And as you mentioned, it's generous. If folks listening understand music terminology, I just purely experimentally tried moving both on the beat, on the downbeats, I should say, and on the upbeats, and I could chain together both of those. It's not a huge issue. The window of opportunity is larger than you'd think, which is terrific because, you don't need to be a musician to nail this game. And additionally, this could be a great teaching tool for folks wanting to incorporate video games into teaching, like music stuff. So that's super cool. You can calibrate the controllers as well every single time you play, and it only takes like a minute, which is terrific if you're playing on different monitors or different controllers. The thing that always gets me on controllers and playing rhythm games is just latency between the button press and the actuation of the button versus what I'm hearing, because I can hear the beat. As a musician, I hear the beat. I know where the beat is. The button press takes time. The traveling of the button down takes time. The actuation of the button takes time. And then the release of the button also makes a sound and a click. So it's like, all this sound is all everywhere all at once. This is very much a me problem, and this is not any fault of the game. I'm just talking out loud because I'm a dude on a podcast. That's what I do. But that's something that I noticed.
There might be some truth to that. I think rhythm games and wireless technology is kind of, it's close. Like, there's probably latency. Like, there's no doubt about that. I think one of and it's funny because now I'm going to kind of go back on what I said about Guitar Hero being my first rhythm game. Parappa the Rappa was actually my first rhythm game. And most notably about that game's, I guess not notably, but infamously about the re-release of that game on PS4 is just how terrible the latency was, because that is a PlayStation 1 game using a wired control, and now it is out of modern tech that does not use a wired controller. And so the PS4 version of Parappa the Rappa is basically unplayable unless you are just very good at playing a bad game, if that makes sense.
Yeah. The wireless latency, or even just the latency between the controller recognizing an input and the system, as well as just the physical travel distance of a button or a keyboard in the case of NecroDancer, which I don't like playing that game with, at least with my keyboard. It's just something to keep in mind if you are somebody that is very nitpicky about sound. But as we've both said like a few times now, the ability to calibrate is there, and the window of opportunity is pretty big. Like, it's tough to consistently and frequently miss beats if you are not trying to, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can get mixed up as far as when you're in a combat situation. It's easy to get a little mixed up because you're also trying to determine how the enemy's going to move, But again, eventually you figure it out. Like, the enemy movements don't change. So,
well, great segue. Let's talk about how combat works. So the whole board, to use your term,
it's
actually well, a board is really more correct here because it is a grid, and there are also sort of like quote unquote disco floor aspects to it. Like, the floor will change colors mildly, which you can turn off if that's something you're sensitive to. But you're moving around on this grid. Enemies are moving around on this grid. All of the enemies are going to follow a specific kind of pattern. And to attack them, you basically just run into them. That's what you do. You automatically swing your weapon if you run into them. And the key is, like you said, Keith, to just figure out the patterns and keep all of that in mind as you're moving around. And I will admit freely that I died a lot when I first picked up this game. The learning curve, it's there. It definitely exists. And, when people call this game a roguelite, I think that's one of the first things people think about is, like, difficult. And difficult's a strong word, but the learning curve, it's steeper than a lot of other games.
Yeah, this is my third playthrough of the game, and the last time I played this prior to playing it for this podcast might have been about 8 months ago. So coming back into it, I was like, it should be. This is going to be a breeze. And no, I very much was like dying a lot, like maybe the first 40 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, the first like 30, 40 minutes that I was playing, I was dying a lot and I was getting frustrated. And then I remembered, like, no, that's it's built into this. Like, you're supposed to. That's why they give you the diamond system. That's why you have save files that sort of keeps track of all of this, so you kind of get buffed a little more each and every time. It's built around that. So that frustration, it's, you know, Tilt is its own thing, and it's difficult to sort of talk about on a podcast that is trying to be under like 2 hours. But they have that in mind. They have mechanics that you can exploit to make those easier as you go. Or, if you are so inclined, you can turn on permadeath mode in the options, so one death is game over for real. We talked about attacking. There are a host of items because this is a Zelda game. All of the items from Zelda that you could possibly think of. Boomerangs, bombs, bomb chews, arrows, shovels. They're all there. Did you use any of these like frequently?
I used the bombs. I never really messed with the arrows. My question for you is, who did you play as?
Good call. We did not talk about the characters. So at the start of the game, you have the option to play as Link or Zelda, the titular character from Cadence of Hyrule. Well, yes, but the titular character from NecroDancer, whose name is Cadence, appropriately enough, they are in this game. But you don't get to play as them just yet. You start as Link or Zelda. I started with Zelda for the first 20 minutes, and then I didn't play the game for a week. And when I came back, I was like, I'm just going to play as Link just to see what's different. And then I just continued that file as Link. It's a little more like traditional Zelda experience because they each, you know, they get special abilities and items. Link's abilities are his shield and his, what do you call it? Whirlwind attack.
Yeah, so my first 2 playthroughs were I was just playing as Link. And so I switched it up and played as Zelda. And one of her abilities that I just could not get down was her, I think it's Nairu's Love or something that she uses as a shield. And I just could not ever get that down. It was a pain in the ass killing Octoroks and Deku Scrubs. So I very rarely used block with Zelda. I think Link's is a lot easier to pull off.
The advantage to Link's is you can just hold down your shield and then move as you please. With Zelda's Nairu's Love, you have to time it. Mm-hmm. You know, you can't just have it up all the time. But from what I was reading, like that can also reflect melee attacks, I think I saw. So a lot of folks consider Zelda to be a more defensive character. You might have more insight on that than me.
I still play like again, I didn't really use her defenses or anything like that. I just kind of played her like I played Link. I didn't use a lot of the magical items either. I didn't use like the fire rod or the ice rod. Bomb chews I thought were absolutely useless. There's a lot of there's a ton of the Zelda items you would want to see in a Zelda game. Not a lot of uses for them, at least in my opinion, because I just did not use a lot of them.
I had a little bit of luck with the arrows, especially when water was involved that I couldn't cross. That was a little helpful. I liked using bombs because, you know, playing on a grid and the way this game is played, it had a real Bomberman feel to it.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, cool, this is like Bomberman, but good. And it was, you know, and they're particularly useful too. I mean, I wouldn't call them overpowered, but they take down a lot of stuff in this game.
When you play Symphony of the Mask, you do have to get good at using them because there are Dodongos that you have to take out, and the only way to kill them is to use bombs. So they kind of force you to use the bombs a little bit in the DLC. As far as like because you can get different weapons for each character, right? So like with Link, you don't always have to use the Master Sword. You can use like a javelin, you know. Was there a specific weapon that you stuck to?
Full disclosure, an hour in, but I didn't beat the game. I did not get to the final fight. I beat a couple of the bosses. I just watched the rest of the gameplay on YouTube. But I mainly just stick to the sword just because I found myself in that rhythm. I did get the broadsword, I think it's called, upgrade, where you can sort of attack 3 squares in front of you, and then both diagonals. I found that was incredibly useful.
Yeah.
And I kept that upgrade as long as I could every single time. But I didn't really. I don't even think, to be honest with you, I don't think I found the javelin in my playthrough.
So I don't think I 100%ed this game, but I did find all of the optional weapons. The one that I stuck to was the flail, which essentially it's so overpowered because typically in an enemy encounter, you kind of want to literally dance around them sometimes until there's an opening for you to attack. But with the flail, you kind of just don't have to worry about that. Like, you can keep going in your straight line sometimes, and the flail will just attack adjacent squares and just take out the enemy. But if you do happen to have to backtrack, and let's say there's enemies behind you, the flail will also take out the enemies behind you as well, because it is attacking adjacent squares. So I thought the flail was, like, I wouldn't say necessary, because I obviously got through a majority of the game before I got it. And then you tack on the power-ups that you can put on the weapons themselves. So for the flail, I added poison to it. So if an enemy that I hit didn't die right away, they would at least be poisoned, and then I can just kind of fuck off somewhere else on the board, and then they would just die eventually, and I wouldn't have to worry about them. So it's stuff like that I thought was really interesting that they put it, because when you play a Zelda game, you're always kind of just using the Master Sword or a sword of some sort. Link doesn't have like nunchucks on him or something, so
yeah, take note, Nintendo. No nunchucks. Gotta fix that.
That was the other thing that I really liked about this game, was that you could, and it took me forever to find out that you could even switch your weapon. My first playthrough, I just was on the pause screen. I was like, what are all these other weapons on the side of the menu here that I have? And lo and behold, you just switch your weapons. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, this game, I mean, the more I think about it and the more we talk about it, this game does have a lot of similarities to The Binding of Isaac, insofar as you get a lot of different ways and items to power yourself up. It's just, this one is not quite as chaotic and a bit slower paced, which is fine. Fine to me. We sort of talked about the combat. We talked about how all of that works with the special abilities, the items, the enemy patterns. Every enemy has a different pattern. It's really just all about finding out what their pattern and or weakness is, if applicable. For example, there are some enemies that will just, if they see you in a straight line, no matter how many blocks away, they charge at you in a straight line, but only in a straight line. So all you have to do is move out of the way and then hit them whenever they inevitably crash. Things like that. So again, it's a little tough to keep everything in perspective as you're playing, especially if you're just starting out, because there are often a lot of enemies, but once you sort of get into the rhythm and know that charging an enemy all the time is not the best way to go about things, it becomes much easier.
One thing I want to add real quick is, if you are finding the combat is just way too hard, like you are not having it at all, you can actually turn off the need to follow the beat. You can just move around all willy-nilly, whatever you want to do. The enemies still move to the beat, so you just kind of have to watch out for that, but you are not trapped. You're not trapped with the metronome, so to speak.
And the middle ground to that too, that was not in Crypt of the NecroDancer, is you don't have to move every single beat. You can stand still and not get penalized for that. Whereas in NecroDancer, you did. That counted just as a missed beat. But yeah, you absolutely can. That would almost turn this into a different game.
Yeah.
I haven't tried it yet, though.
I definitely was getting to a point when I was playing this, my very first time when I was playing this, where I was like, let me just see what this does. And honestly, I was having a worse time like, because I was having to, like I said, those first 40 minutes are pretty difficult, but I almost thought it was just worse, just free roaming, if that's what you want to call it. And yeah, I was like, yeah, I'm definitely just gonna try and learn what this game is trying to teach me. I think that's kind of the better move, but I mean, completely up to you. And that's great that they even put the option in there.
Oh, 100%. It's definitely trying to teach you that, but I am pro accessibility options in every game. I think if you are complaining about an easy mode in a game, you are a nerd, and you need to realize that video games are just video games. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, this game is chock full of accessibility options. I kind of have just as much fun sitting and looking at the options than I do playing the game.
But you're not, but what about developer intentions?
Yeah.
Like, shut up, nerd. Like, I have played Bach on the saxophone. Bach never intended that shit. Like, it's fine. Art, it's fine. It's art, it's fine.
Were you ever a 4-year-old that played video games once?
Let's real quick go through the development. The development history is pretty short. It was developed by Brace Yourself Games and published by Nintendo and Spike Chunsoft, interestingly enough. Had no idea. They'll be coming up on an episode pretty soon, too. This released 4 years after Crypt of the NecroDancer, roughly. This came out in June of 2019. NecroDancer was in 2015. And initially, the creator, Ryan Clark, just approached Nintendo and asked them to, can we have permission to use the Legend of Zelda content as DLC for Crypt of the NecroDancer? And apparently, it just kind of grew in terms of interest way quicker than they were expecting, and it turned into a new game instead of a DLC, which, honestly, good. Much better, because much more polished.
That's kind of like a developer's dream come true, right? Where Nintendo's just like, yeah, just do whatever you want.
Oh, big time. Yeah. Especially with Nintendo. Like you had mentioned earlier, Nintendo doesn't often do this with small third-party developers. And I think this is a great example of why they should. Because, work with Atlas, Capcom, Ubisoft, you're going to make money.
Yeah. I think that's what makes this extra special, that it's just such a small team.
Right, like there is boundless creativity in the indie scene. Like, we've seen that time and time again with, especially like a game that we both universally and immensely love, Disco Elysium. I mean, that game is made by a sort of smaller studio. For those that aren't in on that, go listen to Keith's episode on Disco Elysium and ours. It is
I'm already asleep.
But no, it's just super cool that they did that with a small independent developer. We're going to talk about the music last because it's the best part, but composer is Danny Baranowski. There's a 25-song soundtrack, which is largely remixing and recomposing different Zelda songs. In the DLC, they added some extra remixes and extra remixers in the folks of Jules Conroy, Family Jules, Alex Esquivel, a rival, and Chipzel. I don't know who any of those people are, but I wanted to give them credit because all of the music is just universally good, as we'll talk about. But that's kind of how this game came to be. It was announced, like you said, Keith, at a Nintendo Direct as part of a showcase for Nintendo Indies that they called Nindies, which sounds like a slur to me, frankly. Don't like that at all.
And I'm just glad I got that right, because I was totally guessing. I was like, I think it was one of those things.
It absolutely was. That's kind of the long and short of the history of this. I played this on Switch. I think it works absolutely brilliantly as a handheld, but you could also play it docked. That's fine too. Anything else that you wanted to touch on before we dived into the music?
Yeah, no, I think I pretty much touched on... I mean, I have some Symphony of the Mask stuff here, but you didn't play it, so I see no reason to even talk about
If you want to talk a little bit about Symphony of the Mask, that's fine. I'm sorry that I didn't get around to it.
No, it's okay. It's nothing that we didn't really say already.
Oh, one thing that I didn't talk about that Ben always has to correct me and jump in to talk about is just the general reception. This game was received really well. Largely scores in the 7 to 10 out of 10 range, and their equivalents thereof if they're out of 20 or out of 100. It was nominated for several awards in 2019. Didn't win there, but did win a couple awards for Best Game based on music and a People's Choice Awards in 2020. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I actually didn't know that anybody liked this game. I didn't really hear anything about it at all. So it was very much an impulse buy for me.
I tell you, one thing that I do sometimes before we do our episodes is look up other reviews of games, just to like, not because I use it as a sponge mechanism to like steal other people's points of view, but more so just to like see if people disagree with me so I can sort of see their point of view and be prepared to talk about it. There are like 2 reviews of this on YouTube. There's not really that many, and one is by IGN. So, of course, we all know IGN. We know how that goes.
9 out of 10.
Little something for everyone. Okay, let's get into the meat of what makes this game so cool, the music.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the music?
Man, this was, as far as Zelda soundtracks go, it's kind of funny because I'm going to kind of put my foot in my mouth with what I said about Crypt of the NecroDancer at the beginning of the episode. But this is kind of one of my favorite Zelda soundtracks, and a lot of it is just iterations of stuff that came before, which is also very Zelda-like because there's not always a ton of new Zelda music with every Zelda release. It's always iterations on something that came before. But anyway, the way that they melded Danny Baranowski, am I saying that right?
Yeah, I think he also goes by Danny B, which is very kind of him.
Yeah, that is, yeah. So Danny B, our guy Danny B, the way he melded the soundtrack of Crypt into Cadence makes those iterations of those Zelda songs incredibly unique. And so when I say I'm putting my foot in my mouth is that there are Crypt of the NecroDancer songs in this game, but those songs are also Zelda songs. And you are a musician, so you could probably talk about that way better than I can. You probably know all the terminology.
Well, that's interesting because I was about to say, if I'm remembering correctly, you used to write about music in some capacity. So I was going to say the same to you. Like, you could probably speak on this at length.
I mean, write about music. I would review concerts, and I would talk about any one musician's performance. I don't know exactly that's writing about music, but yeah, technically, yes. Technically, well, I am a certified professional published author, so whatever.
Which, by the way, is super fucking cool.
I don't know who decided to give me money for that, but I mean, I know who did. It was the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Thank you very much, but I don't know why.
So, how would you describe the aesthetics of the music in this game? To me, it's, you said that it borrows from, it's like a melding of Crypt mixed with the Legend of Zelda soundtrack, which of course it is, but aesthetically, like what musical elements do you hear in this?
So, one of the main reasons why I did not really like the soundtrack for Crypt was that it is just a little bit too electronic for me. And like there, it seemed like there was no discernible instruments in Crypt of the NecroDancer. It sounds very, very synthy, whereas, you know, you get something like I have here, one of my standout songs is for Kakariko Village. Everybody knows Kakariko Village, right? But then you get our boy Danny B's take on Kakariko Village, and man, there is a bass line in Kakariko Village that is so good. It sounds like there's like a little more attention was paid to having actual instruments. It's still electronic. Like, I don't think, you know, Danny B's pulling out a bass and laying down a track, or, you know, taking out a guitar or whatever and playing a guitar or anything. It's still electronic. It's still synthesized, but it's going to sound real snobby of me, but it sounds like music, if that makes sense.
I mean, I am a fan of EDM.
Okay.
So I liked the Crypt of the NecroDancer soundtrack, but this OST, I think predominantly, if we had to assign a genre to it as a primary, it would be electronic dance music or just electronic music.
Yeah.
But what it does is it borrows heavily from rock and metal. There is extensive use of distorted guitar, rhythm guitar, power muted palm muted power chords, and just like distorted guitars playing the melodies in a way that's reminiscent of, like, not shred because they're not shredding, and not power ballad because that makes me think of 80s hair metal, but like, yeah. Almost. I'm not super familiar with Gent, to be honest with you, but okay. Almost. There's a lot of that, even in the overworld theme of Hyrule. The guitars are very
chuggy. I'm trying to think of like an area where Death Mountain has a very kind of sound to it.
Yeah, that was one of my standout tracks. I liked that quite a lot. I think I listened to this one. I've been listening to the soundtrack all day. Wizrobe? Is that somebody?
That's an enemy.
Yeah.
Wizrobo is the play on that, yeah.
Yes, that is the one. That piece is, I really, really was a big fan of that. And it's good that the music is so strong, because, I mean, you're a testament to that. If it's not, it's infinitely easier to bounce off this game. So, like, with NecroDancer, you weren't a fan of that music, so why would you stick around for 5 or 6 hours to play this game that is based around that music?
It's different if you're at an EDM concert. I will say I love going to EDM concerts, but I will not just sit at home and listen to EDM.
Listening to the EDM music at those concerts is not the primary activity from what I understand.
Yes.
Yeah, this is, man, if you're looking for an OST to just listen to, I know Ryan from Listoff Podcast, which shout out to them, love those guys. When we did our episode on Lisa, he was like, this OST is great. I really love the soundtrack. Maybe I'll try this game out. This game will do that to you times 10. Like, it's so good because you've got the melodies that Koji Kondo wrote, and it's adapted by Danny B in such unique and powerful ways and fun ways. Like, it's fun. The music is just fun. Mm-hmm. And you could hear the influence from his tracks. He composed for Super Meat Boy and The Binding of Isaac, most notably as far as video games go, and some indie films, but I didn't really look into that. I just took the word for it from Wikipedia. Thank you, Wikipedia. But I can't overstate how much I like the music in this. It's great. It's terrific.
It's so good. And like I said, it makes those Zelda songs that we know, that we're very familiar with, but because there's a little pinch of Crypt of the NecroDancer in there, it makes it sound like a totally different song. The other thing I think is very unique that they did, it's not really that subtle, is when you clear the board of enemies, a lo-fi kind of version of the world song plays, depending on where you are, which I think is just awesome. It's just a really nice touch to let you know, no, everything's good. You got nothing to worry about.
Yeah. In the playlists, they refer to those just by the same title, but with the parenthetical peaceful. And yeah, they're great. It's good. I mentioned that this music is powerful and it's hard hitting. You've got the chug 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 of the guitar and the bass and the drums, but it's not always like that. If it were always like that, this game would be exhausting, and I would not be able to play it for more than like 25 minutes. There are reprieves. There is slow music, and there is, for lack of a better term, pretty music. Mm-hmm. Music that is not pump you up and get you going.
Right. I think the best example of that NecroDancer and like the link, because a lot of this music is very linked to the past, and so I think the best blend of that is probably the Lost Woods, which kind of has like this weird it almost sounds like a theremin is playing. It sounds like really whimsical, but then also a little bit of the Lost Woods theme is in there also. But like you said, it's like very energetic dance music as well. And that's also probably like one of my favorite tracks, next to Kakariko Village, is that Lost Woods theme.
Yeah, it's tough to pick a favorite. Speaking of music, a lot, and you mentioned this a couple of times, Keith, there are a lot of musical puns in this game. Just a ton. I mean,
I appreciate it so fucking much. I love it.
Oh, yeah. They're great. The protagonist's name is Cadence. The main villain, up to a point, is Octavo. Mm-hmm. And, there's more. And there's a prominent use of musical instruments like the golden lute, which is an important item in the game. It's very nice. They're never obnoxious. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if King Dodongo is King Babongo or something. Yeah. There's another... I'm blanking so hard on it. I didn't write down any of the enemy names, but it's a play on words of maraca. And I'm blanking on the enemy, but
I think it's Goma. It's Gomaraka.
Yes, that is it. Thank you. But yeah, it's all like that. And even up to the final boss, when you're fighting Ganon, he's playing an organ for like half of the battle, going between playing the organ and then beating your ass, playing the organ, beating your ass.
Which is a very Zelda thing. I mean, Ganon does play the organ in Ocarina of Time, so...
See, I'm showing my ignorance here because I never beat that game.
Oh, okay.
Or even got to Ganon.
Yeah, so, yeah, when you first walk into that boss chamber, he's sitting there playing an organ. Pretty awesome part of that game, if I have to say. I'm not a huge fan of Ocarina of Time, but pretty good moment in that game.
Man, I'm just realizing that the one Zelda game that I actually beat did not feature the series antagonist. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, if you're looking for Ganon in this game, yeah, he's here. This, for all intents and purposes, this is very much just a Zelda game.
Yeah, and speaking of that, at the end, we usually dedicate the second half of the episode talking about the plot. There's not a lot here. We could go over it pretty quickly. You play as, well, the beginning, Keith, you alluded, there's like an intro similar to NecroDancer. Mm-hmm. There is this mysterious villain named Octavo. He basically uses a magical lute to put Hyrule's king and Link and Zelda to sleep. And Cadence from NecroDancer gets summoned to the Zelda world. It's not her world. She doesn't know what's going on. So this is basically just a quest to get her, to get Cadence home. It's kind of revealed halfway through the game after you beat Octavo's 4 henchmen, his 4 champions, that Octavo is really there because he's trying to battle Ganon, who's going to take over Hyrule in the future. Everybody teams up at the end to take on Ganon. and of course, everything wins. The ending is kind of ambiguous. We don't really know if Cadence returns home.
Well, I think you are supposed... I think that's when they intend you to go through the playthrough as Octavo, which...
Oh, okay.
I did start that, but again, I just don't really care for the original characters. And so I very much bounced off of it because I'm like, I don't care about this guy. So...
That's fair. Yeah, just a very short plot. You're not going to be playing this game for the plot. I never thought about the plot as I was playing. It's just so secondary, as it is in a lot of Zelda games. It's all about the gameplay.
Right.
Not a bad thing sometimes, Well, we are sort of wrapping things up at this point. So one question for you is, first of all, do you recommend this game? I think I know what you're going to say to that, but who would you recommend this to? Is this just a blanket, everybody should play this because it's that good? Or, is there anybody you'd recommend this to, like somebody looking for this or somebody looking for that in a gameplay experience?
Who would I recommend this to? Would I recommend it? That was, I guess, kind of the worry going into this episode. So the one of the main reasons I recommended this for us to talk about is on the basis that you and Ben are musicians. And you guys, as much as you guys talk about music, you guys have never brought up rhythm games. You guys have never really talked about rhythm games. And I also know that Ben loves Zelda. So thanks for being here, Ben. So just off of those things, I was like, I feel okay recommending it to you guys, whether you like it or not. I mean, that's whatever, I don't expect every game that I like. And I mean, even going back to my show, I don't, when I talk about a game, when it comes down to the end of the episode, I don't rate the game. I don't give it a number rating. I have a scale of like not recommend, stay away from this game, to recommend, go absolutely 100% go play it. And if there's a game that I am recommending, whether or not because I think it is awesome, because all the stars align, because historically it's great, it still plays great, it's aged very well, and it has some sort of legacy or whatever, all those things align, somebody could just not like the game, even if I was like, yeah, it's really fucking cool. And so with Cadence of Hyrule is kind of a weird game to recommend to somebody, honestly. You have to really enjoy rhythm games. That is what this game is, first and foremost. And if you don't like rhythm games, you're not going to like Cadence of Hyrule. But with that said, if you are, moderately interested in rhythm games, if you've played games like Parappa the Rappa or Guitar, well, how much of a tangent will you let me go on? How much leash are you giving me, Rick?
Please, the floor is yours.
Cadence of Hyrule is not like, it's not a rhythm game like Guitar Hero. It's not a rhythm game like Parappa the Rappa or anything like that. You are not pressing certain inputs to obtain your goal. You can very much move around however you want to move around, as long as it's in service to that beat. So you are just, it's a different type of rhythm game. So I guess I'm not really saying if you ever dabbled in Guitar Hero or anything, because they're not the same. But if you have any type of moderate interest in rhythm games, and you are an avid Zelda fan, I think the only reason why you wouldn't enjoy this as a Zelda fan is maybe because it's just a little too iterative of those 2D Zeldas. This is, very much like, I think I've said it probably 10 times already in this episode. This is a very nostalgic kind of game for me, even though the game is only like 2 years old. So this really kind of is like a greatest hits of 2D Zeldas in a lot of ways. And, if you do put down the money for the Symphony of the Mask DLC, you're going to get more of that. Because now there's just Majora's Mask stuff in there. There's different portions of the map that are opened up. And, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I would just recommend this to somebody who just likes Zelda games. I definitely think you should give it a shot, though. If not, I don't know, maybe just go on YouTube and check out the soundtrack. I don't even know if I answered the question. I have no idea. This is what happens. This is what a regular episode of my podcast sounds like.
I understand what you're saying. I think even if somebody is turned off by the idea of a rhythm game, like thinking of Guitar Hero, knowing, like you said, knowing that this is different than that is good to know going in. Because this does not feel like playing Guitar Hero, not even a little bit.
No.
Guitar Hero's primary verb is music, and while that's a major part of the DNA here, there's also combat and exploration that is a high focus area as well. So it's not, rhythm game is such a weird term because it conjures up DDR and Guitar Hero and Rock Band. And, there's DNA of that here, but it's not the whole thing. Anybody that likes Zelda, I think, should give this a shot. Anybody that likes, like, procedurally generated maps, like Isaac, like the roguelites, I think might like this. My only caveat to recommending this is just the price. I can't in good faith recommend $40 for this unless you are a diehard Zelda fan. I really can't. I bought Crypt with the NecroDancer for $15. That seems about right to me. I think, I mean, my thoughts is that Nintendo is being Nintendo, so they're charging for the Nintendo product, if this goes on sale, I think, I think I got this for $25. That's fair.
I got this for like $15, so I don't know if they were just having one off sale or something, but I mean, will I personally play every bit of content in this game? Probably not, but they put in a lot of replayability. It's a completely, when you play as Octavo, it's a completely different game. It's not the same as if you were playing as Zelda or Link. It's completely different. There are different enemies. And of course, the Symphony of the Mask DLC is there as well, which is a completely separate thing as well. I do think $35 for the base game. And the Symphony of the Mask DLC was free. Is that still free?
I am not sure, to be honest with you.
That would really suck if they're charging for that now. Then, yeah, that is tough. I mean, I will still, whether or not the DLC is free or not, I would still say you're still getting a lot of game.
Real-time checking, Symphony of the Mask is $10. The season pass is $15.
Man, that's a bummer. Okay, yeah. What a full price game is like $60. So, yeah, that's a little tough. I would still say there's a ton of content in there. Again, I'm not gonna play all of it. If this is something you really want to play, there's tons of stuff in it for you. But yeah, I mean, yeah, that's kind of tough to get around.
It really is. It really is. I guess just going full circle, that's one of the drawbacks of someone like Nintendo working with indie developers is, it boosts up the price quite a bit. And I'm not saying that Sony and Microsoft don't do that. Mm-hmm. We're just not talking about them right now. We're talking about Nintendo. And like Apple, they tend to jack up their prices if their name is on something. Regardless of how you feel about it, that's just sort of the reality. So I don't know. $50 if assuming the base game is $35 and the season pass is $15, steep. That's steep.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it won't be worth it to some people. Would I pay that? No, I would not. Would somebody like, that is super into Zelda, all things Zelda, hey, if $50 is their price, that's fine. I don't think, like you said, there is a ton of content in this game, and there's even, with the accessibility options, permadeath mode. How are you going to get through the whole game without dying once? That's a challenge, and the potential to speedrun this, I'm sure, is very high. So there's a lot. I think you have to be in the pocket of everything this game has to offer for me to recommend $50 for the whole thing in good faith.
Definitely. Yeah. Did you like the game, though?
Oh, I genuinely did. The first 15 to 20 minutes, I was conflicted, and I thought I was going to bounce off it very hard. But once I sort of understood what it was, like you said, what it was trying to teach me about how to play, then almost immediately I was like, this is actually a blast. Mm-hmm. This is a lot of fun. And it's also like, I play a lot of story-based games. 30, 40, 50-hour games, it's just story. And it's really nice to have a game I could pick up for 20 minutes, not have to talk to anybody, just play a game. That's so great. And on a handheld.
And after a while, like I said, you're not even kind of really paying it full attention, because you are just also kind of just sitting there listening to the music also, because that is a very big part of the game, is listening to the music. And yeah, I was genuinely nervous recommending this game to you guys, because I'm like, well, even though they are musicians and they could probably appreciate this in some way, they still might hate playing it.
Oh no, I mean, I have a feeling Ben would like this maybe more than I do, just because I am traditionally not on the Zelda train, nor am I like a roguelite guy. But no, I had a lot of fun. I'm
good.
I'm not going to see all the content in the game, but I am going to go back to it after this episode. Like, this is not something I'm going to put down forever.
Well, I can't wait to see if Ben tries this out, and I eagerly await the amended episode where Ben talks about this game.
Every episode, or every instance of Ben's name, we're just going to put in some audio, stitch in some audio of him responding. So it's a little bit like Mystery Science Theater.
Yeah.
That kind of vibe. All right, we've got some stuff to cover before we say goodbye. However, as all podcasts do, we've got to get the plugs out of the way at the very end. First of all, if you're listening, thank you so much. And if you're listening because you're a fan of Keith's show, thank you doubly so. I can't tell you how much it means to me to have Keith on, for one, but just knowing people like what we do and come to listen, that really means a lot. So thank you. But I did want to get some plugs out of the way. We have a Twitter, we have an Instagram, we have a Discord, and we're going to tell you all about it. Twitter, really, if you search Pixel Project Radio, you'll find us because it's there. But Twitter, @Pixel Project Pod, Instagram, @Pixel Project Radio Podcast, Discord. You can find that link in the episode description and on our Twitter and Instagram in the bio and pinned tweet, respectively. Well, not respectively, but you get what I mean. It's all there. Just as importantly, Keith has some online presence as well, and I want to give him some space to talk about that.
I do just want to say that if you're not in the PPR Discord server, it is a lot of fun, and I also want to thank Rick specifically making a channel just for me, the Unpopular Opinion channel. But if you want to hear more of my unpopular opinions, you can check out the Main Quest podcast. It is on this very podcast app that you're listening to this episode on. And so, yep, just search Main Quest podcast. There's only one out there, so. And then if you want to check out my Instagram, it's really tough to throw out my socials because I'm really not very active on all of them right now. I'm kind of in a weird spot as far as the podcasting scene goes, but the Instagram is _main_quest. And my Twitter is main quest. I say that not confidently.
Yeah, and even though you're not super active, they could always go back and check out past posts that might be talking about your episodes or link to your episodes. So definitely a little something for everyone, as we've heard said before.
I feel like I'm more or less just commenting on Twitter these days and really posting anything.
Yeah, perhaps your most unpopular opinion comes every Friday. It's okay to like a video game.
It is okay to like a video game. And thanks again for having me on. I really appreciate it.
If you're still here, thank you so much. As always, my name is Rick Firestone, joined by wonderful guest Keith from the Main Quest podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.